Women in ministry. What a polarizing conversation. What an interesting conversation. Every time we talk about it, everybody gets mad at me, and that's okay. Recently, Rick Warren got kicked out of the SBC. Recently, Saddleback Church, the church that Rick Warren started, was the founding pastor of, got kicked out of the SBC. Why? Because when Rick Warren was there, he ordained some women. And the SBC apparently doesn't like that. They don't mind other things, but that they draw the line at. And so Rick Warren went and did an interview with Christianity Today, which we reacted to. And you guys go watch the other video if you want to. I thought it was a good video. I gave you guys my thoughts on it. We went through all the verses. And I landed in a different place than Rick. Ironically enough, so did his successor. Ironically enough, so did the pastor who became his successor. Yep. So, I don't think anyone else caught this, but I thought it was very interesting. So, Rick lays out why he thinks women should do things in ministry. As do I. We see deacons in the Bible that were women. We see women prophesy. We see in Acts 2, in the last days, your sons and daughters will prophesy. So we see women will be prophesying. We'll see women who are deacons. We see, right, so on and so forth. Yet, some people think women can't do much of anything in church. And where I would land, show my hand, is I would land in a place, basically a soft complementarian. I would say that women can operate multiple variety of spiritual gifts, with the caveat that they cannot be a lead pastor, elder, church planter. Okay, that's where I would draw the line. Rick Warren disagrees. Let's hear him out and him address this specific point. All right, check this out.
Now he has a woman go tell the apostles. Can a woman teach an apostle? Evidently did it on the first day. He chose her to be the first preacher of the gospel.
So you would, after the last 3 years, you would support men and women as elders, as senior pastor, as everything within the church?
I would. But here's what I say.
Okay, so he's very clear. I would. You would support men and women as elders, senior pastors in the church. Okay, and he said, I would. Now, he gives this caveat that it's a secondary issue. Let's hear him out.
Okay, because I have to say, this is my interpretation. I have to say with humility, it doesn't bother me if you disagree with me. Mm-hmm. For 2,000 years, the church has debated the role of women in culture. But to make it a litmus test for are you a Baptist or not is nonsense.
And you'll see where he disagrees with them.
To which I would say that is not how Paul led in the local church. In fact, he commends Priscilla and Aquila, this couple that was a woman who was teaching in the local church. So that it's not exactly what Paul means. Now,
so he's saying, the verse about like women should sit quiet, not teach. I don't permit a woman to teach. He said, well, you got to let scripture interpret scripture because we see Priscilla and Aquila, who we believe is a spouse, a couple, and they were teaching. Okay.
He means something. And it's not just a flippant statement that's only cultural, because if it was, he wouldn't have tied it to creation. He uses creation and the fall and humanity as a part of the anchor of this conversation. But I want you to notice the verbs that Paul uses in this particular passage. He says this. He says, I do not permit a woman to teach or assume authority over a man. Also, another group of Bible-believing conservative theologians that would say, in particular, around those two verbs, that those verbs are in conjunction with one another. So, like, you can't separate them out. It's not like teach is one thing and take authority is another. Paul is using two words to communicate one idea, two verbs to communicate one idea. And as he says it, he's saying, I do not permit a woman to usurp. The word literally means to usurp or seize authority. So I don't permit a woman to seize authority, to teach and seize authority over a man. So my interpretation and the interpretation of our elders and many Bible-believing theologians is that what Paul is talking about is the condition, the behavior of a woman as she exercises the spiritual gifts, as she exercises her functions in the church. So just like Paul gives order in a home with a husband being the head of a household, he's saying, I don't permit a woman to come and seize that role. And so when a woman teaches in a local church, she's teaching in conjunction with the authority of the church. She's not trying to overtake that authority when she uses that spiritual gift. She's using it under the authority of the eldership or the leadership of that local church.
So that's his justification and his explanation for why he allows women to teach. Now listen to the rest of it.
So there's no question in the New Testament, most theologians would argue or agree that there were women who served as deacons. The question is in terms of eldership. Now, our interpretation of the New Testament is that the role of eldership, according to God's design, is that's a role reserved for men, that men...
You guys catch it? Am I tripping? Am I tripping?
serve in the role of overseer. Another word, the Bible interpretation of the New Testament is that the role of eldership, according to God's design, is that's a role reserved for men, that men serve in the role of overseer. Another word the Bible uses is overseer, that God has designed, and in particular, the way that God has designed the authority structure of both the home and the church is that a man would serve as an elder. But that eldership is held in conjunction as a family. God's family is like a family business with men and women together running the family business. That God designed it, that a husband would be the head of a household, as Ephesians 5 teaches. And in the same in the local church, our interpretation is that an elder would be reserved for the role of a man. But with
Okay, so they disagree on this, right? I'm not tripping.
Apostle evidently did it on men. Go read humility. Go read the preamble of the
So you would, after the last 3 years, you would support men and women as elders, as senior pastor, as everything within the church?
I would.
So he does, yet
that God has designed, and in particular, the way that God has designed the authority structure is agreed that there were women who served as deacons. The question is in terms of eldership. Now, our interpretation of the New Testament is that the role of eldership, according to God's design, is that's a role reserved for men, that men serve in the role of overseer. Another word the Bible uses is overseer, that God has designed, and in particular, the way that God has designed the authority structure of both the home and the church is that a man would serve as an elder. But that eldership is held in conjunction as a family. God's family is like a family business with men and women together running the family business. That God designed it, that a husband would be the head of a household, as Ephesians 5 teaches. And in the same in the local church, our interpretation is that an elder would be reserved for the role of a man.
okay, I had to run that back I think we all heard the same thing. The question to Rick was, are you okay with a woman elder head pastor? Rick said, I would. Do you affirm that? I would, but it's not an essential. Pastor Andy Wood said, we believe that being an elder is reserved for a man. Women can be elders, overseers, lead pastors. This isn't about if women can preach or not. We settled that in the previous video. This isn't about if women can preach or not. So he's taking a soft complementarian position, which I hold, which Alan Parr holds, which Mike Winger holds, so on and so forth, right? Women can operate in a teaching gift. Women can serve. Women can lead. They just cannot be head pastor, senior pastor, lead pastor, overseer, right? And in Scripture, we see women prophets. We see women judges. We see women deacons. So it sounds like there's some disagreement there, unless Rick just flat out misspoke, which, by the way, I would love to sit down with Rick. Rick, come sit down with your guy, man. You know me, Rick. We get a much better conversation over here, if you know what I'm talking about. But so I am curious on it. Does this then cause the type of alarm, not other stuff, because there's other stuff that I probably disagree with Rick on and settle back on, but does this then cause the degree of alarm? Those of you guys that are hard complementarians, do you guys see this as they're apostate, they're far gone, they're bad? Or do you not see this as essential as it initially seemed? Right? Does that make sense? Right? We're not always agree on doctrine, and no one is going to change their minds. Romans 14, let they be convinced in their own mind because they do it anyway, no matter what they say. Yeah. I mean, listen, I think if we're talking about an overseer, an elder overseer of a church, per 1 Timothy 3, per Titus, that's a man. Like, that's a man, right? I think the issue becomes, that's a man. That title is for man. So I would not co-sign a woman lead pastor. I would not co-sign a woman elder. But I think women could do everything else. So again, I take a soft complementarian position. I think almost everyone I know takes a position like that, So what do we do with that? And again, those of you guys that are like, yo, no, women can't teach. Well, are you okay with women being deacons? Are you okay with women prophesying, as Acts 2 says, in the last days, your sons and daughters will prophesy? Right? That would be my question to the hard complementarians, right? I don't think that's what he's saying. I think the Bible teaches women can be elders. Yeah, you got to provide Bible for that, Joshua. I don't think that's anywhere in Scripture. Not in the definitely not in the New Testament. I don't think anywhere in Scripture it provides with that. It provides that context, right? The Old Testament is a past of the Bible. You can't delete the Old Testament, sure. But you got one judge in the Old Testament, right? Deborah was a judge. I don't think you take that and then go, well, therefore women can plant churches and be lead pastors. I don't think you see that. I don't think you see that in the Scripture. I think that's a reach. All right? So I think we have to let Scripture interpret Scripture, right? And we did this, by the way. We went through all the verses on the last video, so I'm not going to go over all the verses again because I want to move on to this other clip. So a woman elder would probably be more effective in ministering to other women, or a women's pastor. That's what we have in my church. We have a women's pastor, right? If we have a women's pastor, she can minister to women. She doesn't have to be an elder. I'm a millennial, so I'm more liberal on women being in charge. Let's not forget about Junia. Yes, but Junia was not an elder. You guys keep saying, like, y'all said the same thing about, what was it, Phoebe or Aquila and Priscilla, Romans 16. They're not elders. There's a difference between an elder, overseer, and someone that's teaching. I grew up in a hard complementarian church, and women couldn't do anything but teach kids or lead worship and never have the title pastor. Yeah, I'm okay with women having the title pastor, personally, as long as it's not elder. In my denomination, women are allowed to be lead pastors, but they submit to state and international overseers who are men. Interesting, Zach. So your guys' role, see, that would be a denominational distinction. Your guys' role of elder overseer wouldn't be that every church pastor is the elder overseer, that there's elder overseers from outside of the church. That sounds kind of like what your position would be, right? Shout out to, I'm going to do you guys' super chats. I'm going to come back to your question. Shout out to Morgan. The Orthodox tradition has always, thousands of years, of women being deacons, but it's clear they cannot be priests. Yeah, I would agree. Is this when we take into account the cultural role of women in the Bible? Women's cultural role has changed in society. We can agree on that is not contradicting of the Bible. I think we don't bend to society and culture. I think we lead and build culture. So I don't think just because then you could use that to justify anything. You could use that to justify homosexuality. You can use that to justify polygamy. You can use that to justify whatever you want. Oh, well, culture is changing. The red pill community is changing on polygamy. They want to have multiple wives. There's guys that do that. So what does that mean? That we don't open the floodgates because these red pillars who think they're high value men want multiple wives, and culture has changed in that segment. Therefore, we need to allow that. Then that would be regressive, in my opinion. You know, I wouldn't discard you and say you're not saved, or you're not a Christian, or you're a JV Christian because you disagree on this with me. You know, 1 Timothy 3:11 is in the context of overseer. Yeah, an overseer, most of the time, an overseer is a elder overseer of a church, a lead pastor. A lead pastor, again, that's. And so if someone's saying, well, in our church, we don't have overseers, we have an overseer of a dozen churches, and that overseer is a man, but then women can lead the church and they're submitted to that overseer. Well, I would say, okay, well, that's not, I don't think that's how Scripture or history is using that word, but that's kind of like you're finding kind of an exception to the rule, if you will, right? 3:11 includes women. Look it up. Joshua, no, it doesn't, my guy. No, it doesn't. You're wrong. You won't find any scholar or theologian that will look at the elder requirements, not deacon, but elder requirements, and say that was about women. You won't. You won't find any scholar, any commentary that will co-sign that, and except far left egalitarian stuff, bro. Again, I would encourage you, sit with Mike Winger's super exhaustive dive on this. He did a very good job reading all of the egalitarian literature on it. That's just not there. You know, so if folks want to have a workaround and say, well, really the women are submitted to the elder overseer, and he's an overseer of a dozen churches, that becomes a denominational distinction. And I wouldn't say that you're like not saved or you're a bad Christian. I would just say, yeah, I don't think that's how Scripture reads. I think usually the overseer of a church is the lead pastor of a church. And, you know, yeah, let's move. If you guys want to go to Extra Mile, partner with us for as little as $5 a month. Keep us independent, answering only to you so that we never have to take a brand deal, ever have to take a brand deal, and make a commercial like this.
Our friends at Genucel Skincare have exciting news to celebrate in 2023.
Using Manscaped during my showers after workout has given me much more confidence.
And that's where Mudwater comes in.
True Classic has got your back.
All thanks to the sponsor of today's video, SaveMine.com.
Established Titles is your opportunity to earn the title of Laird or Lady. Subject to credit approval, rates range from 7.99% APR to 19.99% APR, included 0.50% auto pay discount.
If you don't want us to make ads with brands you don't care about, sign up for our online community for as little as $5 a month to keep us independent and ultimately answering to you as our boss. You get all sorts of benefits like daily replays of our after party streams, exclusive access to our Discord community, and early access to our podcast interviews, all starting for only $5 a month.
Kingstream Entertainment.